I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary. This is Ceti from Reach Out Reptiles.
Hi, I'm Jim from Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, and I'm Lori's husband.
Today is Sunday, August 9th, 2020. Welcome to this edition of Super Dwarf Sunday. And this is the edition that everyone's been waiting for all year. Over a year ago, Garrett Hartle from Reach Out Reptiles contacted me and said he had heard my Morelia Python radio interview and that he was intrigued by the snake training and behavior studies I was doing. He said that he would be interested to know what I thought of super dwarf reticulated pythons in regard to temperament, behavior, and training. After messaging back and forth a few times, TC arrived here at only about 7 weeks old on July 23rd, 2019. And over this past year, TC has joined me every week for an episode of Super Dwarf Sunday. And during TC's time here, he has participated in passive habituation to the activity in our household. He has participated in active habituation to handling and socialization with people. TC has participated in training trials and some behavior study, and he's done activities such as target training, station training, foraging exercises, mazes, and problem-solving tasks. TC has also been actively habituated to different environments, including different enrichment areas, activity stations, climbing areas, swimming areas, and he's been exposed to all 5 enrichment categories outlined by the AZA. Those include cognitive, dietary, physical, sensory, and social enrichment. Well, now it comes time for us to tell you our opinion of TC's temperament, behavior, and trainability after spending this past year with him. Before we get into it, let's define what those things mean. First of all, what is temperament? Well, temperament are those personality traits and characteristics that someone is inherently born with. So somebody might have a tendency to be shy or outgoing, introverted or extroverted. Those are just examples. So that's what temperament is, and that can be kind of subjective. Now let's talk about what behavior is. Behavior is observable and behavior is measurable because behavior is just an organism's response to stimuli. It is how an organism responds to things in its environment, and that is very observable and very measurable. So it might be how an organism responds to a stimulus that they see as a perceived threat. And typically there are 3 ways that an organism is going to respond to that. They might respond to that by fleeing or fighting or freezing. So if TC, for example, is afraid of something, we're going to be able to observe if he flees or decides to have a fight response or if he freezes. So when we talk about behavior, that's what we're going to be looking at. How does TC respond to different environmental stimuli? The last thing that we're going to go over is trainability. So what does trainability mean? Well, training is just guided learning. Animals are always learning. It's very natural for us and non-human animals to be learning all the time. If we didn't, and if animals didn't learn, we wouldn't have survived very long to evolve into who and what we are now. And animals certainly wouldn't survive very long or have very good evolutionary fitness if they weren't learning where to find food, where to find shelter, how to find mates, how to protect themselves in their environments. Learning's natural, and all training is guided learning. We are guiding an individual in order for them to learn information or learn a new skill. That's what trainability is. It's just how quickly and how precisely an organism is able to learn a new skill or a procedure and how engaged they are in that guided learning process. I'm sure that you're all excited to hear what we think of TC in regards to temperament, behavior, and trainability. For what it's worth, we have only ever observed Ceti. We haven't observed other super dwarf reticulated pythons. And so what we're going to tell you is just our opinion based on our interaction with one individual, and that's Ceti. What are your overall thoughts of Ceti since he's been here for the past year?
Ceti hasn't changed a whole bunch. He's just like he is right now. He's calm in demeanor. He's very active, wants to be around people, loves to be held, and basically just enjoys his life. This is Ceti every day. If we let him loose, he'll just go up on a log and he'll just lay and just hang out and watch what's going on. He's very observant, but just basically he doesn't get into a whole bunch. He just wants to be himself, and he likes to be around us.
If I were to ask you what his temperament was in regards to somebody who wanted to get a pet snake, what would you say about Ceti's temperament? Let's say somebody wanted a pet snake and they wanted to see that snake a lot. Ceti would be good or not?
Yeah, he'd be good. He likes to be at the edge of his cage looking out. He's observable all day long pretty much. Likes to climb. So somebody having a snake like Ceti, they would be able to look in, see him, open the cage, and he'll probably just lay there at the edge of the cage and look out. Not that he wants to get out all the time, but he likes to stick his head out and see what's going on. So I think somebody that wants a snake that they can observe and watch, he would be great for that.
So what if somebody wanted a snake that they could handle a lot? What do you think about that in Ceti?
I don't handle Ceti that much. Lori usually does. I don't see any problem with him being handled. I don't think he's objected to it. He's pretty obvious, just like he is now. If you're holding him, he's kind of wandering around looking at stuff. So he's moving. So he's not going to just lay there and be still and you could hold him in one hand forever. He's going to want to look around and see what's going on. But so it's an active snake, but not overly active and trying to get away.
So he just climbed back here onto one of his activity stands. So what would you say if somebody came to you and said, I'm really interested in snake training and behavior, and I really want an animal that I can do a lot of training with? Do you think TC fits that bill or not?
I don't think TC really likes a whole bunch of training. He likes a little bit of interaction. Most of the time, I think he really just likes to be out and left alone for the most part. Doesn't want to have to do a whole bunch. Like I said, if he gets up on a log, he'll just go up to an area he can observe and just watch what's going on.
Well, my opinion is that TC has a good temperament. If somebody's going to treat him thoughtfully and respectfully, TC is going to be that same way with you. He's going to reciprocate. I find TC to be a sensitive animal, but a calm animal. And as far as temperament for somebody who wants a good snake family member, unless your family is really rowdy and really rough, I think that TC would be a good snake for that. But because TC tends to have a sensitive nature and can be easily bothered by things that happen, and it takes him a little bit of time to bounce back, I think that if your family is really boisterous, if you have obnoxious family members or rough family members, that Ceti wouldn't be the right snake to have. But if you are an average family who just wants an all-around nice snake to handle and live with, that TC would fit that bill. I think he has a pretty middle-of-the-road temperament. He's certainly amenable to handling. So he's certainly willing to let me handle him quite a bit without protesting, without trying to get away, without hissing, without striking, without getting squirrely and flighty. He's pretty mellow and easygoing. As far as his behavior and how he reacts to certain things, when he gets scared, his typical response is to freeze, assess what he's afraid of, and then move away or decide to engage. If he suddenly gets afraid of something, he moves away. But his first reaction when he's afraid of something isn't to strike or isn't to hiss or isn't to come at that thing. It's to either freeze or move away. Now, if he is backed into a corner where he isn't able to move away, he will strike out, and this has happened during a couple of training exercises. And that's why I say TC is a little bit sensitive and can tend to be easily bothered by things. During one of our training exercises, he struck at and hit one of the training targets with his nose. That really bothered him so much that he didn't engage in that type of training for several months. He was afraid of the target for several months after that. Now, as compared to other snakes we have here, like my Morelia Bredli, they're a really bold and outgoing snake, and they are very resilient to things that happen. And many of them go through a phase where they strike the target during target training, they blow it off immediately, and they get right back into that same training session, and the next time we do a session, it's like nothing ever happened before. Ceti's not quite like that, so you have to be calm and cognizant when you're around Ceti and recognize if something has bothered him, that you might need to put that on hold for a little while and try something else. But overall, I would say his behavior in response to adversity is pretty even-keeled. He doesn't do anything spectacular or anything extreme. He's not a striker or a hisser or a biter, and he's not super flighty where he just darts away and flies out of your hands. Now let's move on to trainability. I would define a highly trainable snake as one that is super fast at learning new skills and super motivated to learn, and it challenges me as a trainer to keep up with how quickly they're learning. Ceti's not there. And then I would define a poor learner as one that takes forever to learn a new skill, or you even question whether they're learning that new skill at all or not. So Ceti's in the middle. Ceti's very intelligent and he does learn new skills, but he doesn't do it at a super fast rate, and he isn't a highly motivated learner. He will engage in training activities, and we have engaged him in training activities like target training, station training, foraging exercises, food puzzles, mazes. And he'll do those activities, but I think he would rather climb and explore enrichment activities than he would do designated training activities. As we look at these three categories, temperament, behavior, and trainability, I initially started to try to put numbers to this and assign Ceti a number, but I really feel like those things are subjective. What I would rate high on the temperament, behavior, or trainability scale for a snake that would be perfect for me may be different than what Jim would rate as high for a snake that would be perfect for him. I decided rather than put numbers to these things that I just wanted to get you to think about temperament, trainability, and behavior from your perspective. And if you were looking for a snake for you personally, what are you looking for in a snake? And I always tell new snake owners when they ask me, what do you think is the best first snake? I ask them, well, what are your expectations of that animal? Make a list of what your expectations of that snake are, and then let's look at species that fit that expectation. Let's go over a few of those questions that I ask people, and I will tell you what I think about Ceti in those regards. And Ceti is now way back here on the back of this activity station, halfway perched on this cat toy, and I'm just going to let him sit there because that's where he's chosen to be. So first, I always ask people in regards to their expectations of their snake, how often do you expect to see your snake? Do you expect your snake to be visible a lot or not? And do you expect your snake to be active when you're awake? And if the answer to that is I want my snake to be visible most of the time, when I walk by the enclosure, I want to see my snake and I want them to be active when I am and I'm awake during the day, then I might steer you to a snake that's diurnal. It means that they're active and awake during the day, and you might be disappointed with a species that's mainly nocturnal or active at night. However, certain species, even when they're inactive during the day, remain visible. Carpet pythons, Morelia bredli, TC, he's always visible all day long. Even though he sleeps most of the day, he doesn't hide. He isn't a snake that typically hides. And so I would say that if you want a snake that's visible a lot, a super dwarf reticulated python, at least ours, is visible almost all the time. Other than the first few days he was here, he doesn't use hides. Now, there are snakes out there that burrow a lot and hide a lot and that you hardly ever see. We have a couple of those species here, and if I had gotten those particular snakes as my only pet snake, I'd be highly disappointed in them because I literally go sometimes days or weeks without seeing them. They hide so much. So you have to be realistic about your expectations in how much you expect to see your snake. The next question is, how active do you want your snake to be? Do you want your snake to be sedentary and really just sit there all the time, and maybe you can see them but they don't move around a lot? They don't swim, they don't climb, they don't move around on the ground a lot, they don't burrow, they're just kind of there. Or do you expect a lot of activity out of your animal? And I would say if you want to see your snake doing a lot of activities, that a super dwarf is a snake for you, because when TC's awake, he's always active. He uses every inch of his enclosure. He does a lot of swimming and climbing, but you need to ask yourself, what kind of activity do I want to see my snake doing? And then if you want a snake that's active, climbs a lot, swims a lot, moves around a lot on the ground or up high, and at times does seek time out of the enclosure to participate in activities, a super dwarf does that. Now, is he as active as the Morelia bredli? And I keep coming back to that because they're my ideal snake. They're really super fast learners. They're extremely active, and they're highly motivated to train and to come out and do things on their own, and they're highly independent. So while I really love them, if you told me, and here's my next question, how much do you expect to handle your snake? That's important because a lot of people keep pet snakes because they want to handle them. If I ask you how much do you expect to handle your snake and you say quite a bit, I wouldn't say a Morelia Bredli is right for you, because while I can handle them and I get them out and I put them away, they don't like to sit there and have me hold them. They like to be moving, exploring, climbing, doing their own thing. They're not a species that really is just going to sit with you the way that you've seen Ceti do in many videos, or for sometimes he has sat with me for 30 minutes or an hour and been content to do that. That's not going to be a Bredli. And so if you're wanting a snake that you can handle, I want to say quite a bit, maybe not excessively, that a super dwarf retic might be right for you. TC's allowed your grandson to hold him for quite a while, right?
Yep.
And how did that go?
Went fine. Yeah, he's fine with people. He doesn't mind being touched or handled at all.
If you want a snake that is okay with handling, TC has been okay with handling. Maybe not all day long, because at some point he's going to crawl away and go sit somewhere, or he's going to crawl away and want to explore. But for a reasonable amount of time, a few minutes to maybe 30 minutes, or I think that your grandson's held him for up to an hour, that's gone fine. The other thing that I would ask you in regard to your snake is, what size enclosure do you expect to have to house your snake in, and how big of a snake or small of a snake are you comfortable handling? Some snakes stay very small, and those really make me uncomfortable to handle because of their tininess. I get nervous handling them and nervous when they're out that I'm going to lose them. But I personally also don't want a snake that's so massive it takes two of us to hold. For me personally, a super dwarf reticulated python, at least what I understand his probable adult size is going to be, is no more than 8 feet. That's perfect for me, because my carpet pythons and my Bredl's pythons can get anywhere from 5 to 8 feet, and I'm comfortable with that. I think if you're looking for a snake, size-wise, that you want to be able to keep in maybe a 6-foot enclosure, give or take, and that you want to be able to handle alone, that they're probably a decent size for you. And the other thing is they're not super fast or super darty. So that's another question I always ask people. What do you want their energy level to be like? Because Bredli are pretty energetic, but they direct that energy in a calculated way. So they're very cautious and methodical about their roaming and their training and their exploring, but they'll do that for a long period of time, like hours and hours. TC is pretty slow and methodical about his exploration and his energy level, where he'll explore for a little while and then he'll sit. But there are other species of snakes, we have some of them here, gopher snakes, bull snakes, that I describe as darty, meaning they're super fast. They have a high energy level and they direct that energy into really quick motion, and it's easy for them to shoot out of your hands or get away from you. So that's another thing that you need to keep in mind when you're picking out a snake. And if you want a snake that doesn't move particularly quickly, we've never really had TC dart or fly or move super fast. He's pretty calm, don't you think?
Mm-hmm, very much. I think the biggest thing is how big a cage or an enclosure you want to make sure that the snake can lay out and stretch. I think a lot of people aren't prepared for that. They think you can keep them in a confined area and keep them pretty well contained so they're curled in that area. They need to get out and stretch. So you need to be able to, as they grow, make sure their enclosure is adequate for them. So you might have to purchase new enclosures as you go along. But so therefore you need to look at what size snake you really want to get. How big is that snake going to get? Because how much space do you have, and how much of an enclosure you really want to invest in for that snake? Because you're going to have to grow with the snake, basically.
Well, and especially with the super dwarf, they're active. And while they're not super high energy, they are an active snake, and they want to do things. If you're somebody that plans to keep a snake in a rack or a tub and doesn't plan to give the snake a lot of environmental stimulation, a super dwarf is not for you. Because I tried to keep TC in a quarantine tub, and usually I try to quarantine snakes for 3 months. And he did okay in that tub for maybe 3 days. And then there was no keeping him in that quarantine tub anymore, because once he discovered there was a world at large, he was constantly trying to get out of that tub. And I would give him exercise time out of the tub, and then he he fought me going back in. And I think within the first week he was here, he was in a 4-foot enclosure. Now he still is in that same enclosure. He hasn't outgrown it yet. So he's still not quite longer than his enclosure. But once I put him in that, he was relaxed and content, and he would rest during his normal rest periods. But when he was awake and active, he would use all of the space in that enclosure and all of the furnishings and the different environmental stimulation and behavioral choices that I provided for him in that enclosure, and he still does. So if you are looking for a snake that you can put in a box and not take out and give a lot of exercise, or who you think doesn't care about seeing out or using a lot of space, I don't think a super dwarf is the right snake for you. There are some snakes that might do okay in that. Like we have one western hognose snake, and most of the time she stays burrowed in her moss or under her substrate, and she comes out a little bit and then burrows again. She is very active around feeding time, and that's when she seeks to come out of the enclosure, and I'll give her foraging activities to do, and that might last a day or two where she's kind of in that higher energy state, and then she goes back to basically staying burrowed. That is not a super dwarf, and a super dwarf, in order to do right by them, they need environmental stimulation, they need behavioral choices, and they need space to move around. That's our opinion, and that's based on one individual animal, which is Ceti. And we love Ceti. And I guess my overall parting statement would be that if you're looking for a decent pet snake with a middle of the road energy level and be pretty amenable to handling, this super dwarf reticulated python would fit that bill. And if he's a good representative of the others in his species, I would say a super dwarf reticulated python is one of the best pet snakes that you could possibly get. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Just as a reminder, from here on out, we're moving our Super Dwarf Sunday episodes to once a month. And on the other 3 Sundays, we're going to have other educational videos involving our other snakes, and that will be called Serpentes Sundays. And we will still continue to do our shorter videos during the week. Ceti's not going anywhere that I know of. I hope Garrett doesn't decide that he wants him back, because we love Ceti, and even my parents have fallen in love with Ceti. And we're looking forward to seeing how he grows and doing this again a year from now to see if how we rate his temperament, behavior, and trainability changes as he gets older and as he matures into a young adult male snake. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.
See you later.
P.S. I forgot to tell you that we do have Ceti merchandise in our Teespring store now. This is one of the women's shirts that's available, but we have unisex t-shirts, men's t-shirts, women's tri-blend t-shirts, I think women's premium t-shirts. We have women's and men's premium hoodies. I think we might have tote bag. I don't remember. We have a lot of Ceti gear on our Teespring store, so I will put a link to that in the description of this video. And so go buy some of our merch with TC on it. It's cool. TC's favorite spot. He'll sit here for hours now.